Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eleanor Harvey. I'm the senior curator at the Smithsonian American Art Museum and curator of the exhibition Alexander von Humboldt and the United States, Art, Nature, and Culture. We're so glad that you're here today for our final symposium presentation by the artist, musician, and researcher, George Steinmann. George is an internationally recognized visual artist and musician based in Berne, Switzerland. He studied painting in Basel and painting, sound, and Afro-American history at the San Francisco Art Institute. His artistic practice is research-oriented and involves field work in which he investigates climate change, biodiversity, and the ecologies of forests, water, and soil. His special focus is on the interconnectedness of art, science, and indigenous peoples' knowledge. In addition to his visual arts practice, George has also performed musical concerts in Europe and the United States, including a performance at Documenta 7 in Kassel and with Grammy Award-winning composer Johnny Copeland. George has been a researcher and lecturer in Europe, the United States, Mexico, and Asia on aspects of contemporary art and science and the interconnectedness of art, culture, and the concept of sustainability. In 2011, he received an honorable doctorate from the Philosophical and Historical Faculty of the University of Berne, and their criteria really maps out George's Humboldtian approach to his life and his work. They summed up, he is an artist whose works reveal complex relationships in social, economic, and cultural networks, a researcher whose projects bring together architects, natural scientists, philosophers, and art historians in a transdisciplinary manner and shape. The critic who demands responsibility, takes a stand, and defines sustainability as a principle of action in the here and now. A mediator who continuously furthers the dialogue about the phenomena of our living environment for the good of the community. And a visionary whose artistic work reinterprets the specificity of place into a medium of transnational understanding. In 2015, George spoke at the Climate Conference in Paris in 2015 on the topic, what change can art and culture achieve? I met George when we both participated in an international symposium on Alexander von Humboldt and mountain ecology in Mexico City, sponsored by the National Autonomous University of Mexico and the Terra Foundation, which has also generously supported this Humboldt exhibition. I was so impressed by George's thoughtful comments and the power of his performance that I asked him if he would develop a presentation for this Humboldt symposium. Today, George is speaking on Looking from Within, Art in the Horizon of the UN Agenda 2030. George, I am pleased to hand this over to you.
Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, I would like to thank the Smithsonian American Art Museum for the invitation. It's a great honor for me to address you today and to share some of our artistic works, all embedded within the context of the UN Agenda 2030 and its sustainable goals. My presentation today is not an academic lecture, but rather more a plea for dialogue. To start with, however, I would like to give you some background information on my artistic equipment in general. I'm educated as a visual artist and musician, and I'm a critic who demands really responsibility, and I take a stand. For me, an artwork has never been exclusively an aesthetic object. In principle, my works aim to deny pure formalistic perception. The visual expression is not limited to just the formal elements of the artwork. My works visualize images that conceptualize meaning. I see art as a genuine cognitive faculty operating on the plane of transdisciplinary networking. I believe that everything is related, Nothing exists by itself. An awareness of the mutual dependency of things is important in the work processes. The focus is on connectedness, context, and the complex relationship between the whole and its parts. In the widest sense, it is on the relationship among various paradigms. Alexander von Humboldt has called it in his book Kosmos, das Weltganze. In this light, all my works are basic research. Disciplinary boundaries are crossed. The allusion of my work to other disciplines, including science, philosophy, and indigenous people's knowledge, therefore, is essential. Last but not least, during my entire practice as an artist, and due to the fact that I grew up in Switzerland, I was always attracted to mountain landscapes and their aesthetics. Since more than 50 years, I make excursions in these territories, and I hope to do so also in the future. To begin with now, as an introduction, I will present some indicator images and keynotes concerning the potential of art within the context of the UN Agenda 2030. Image 1 refers to the dramatic landscape change in the Alps caused by climate change. And I connect this to the statement, art is a characteristic and indicator of change. Image 2 is the Lake Klöntal in the heart of Switzerland, which is used strongly for hydropower and energy. And again, it refers to a sentence which is important for me. Art precisely observes what becomes of our planet Earth in the Anthropocene. The third image, also in the Swiss Alps, is related to geology in the age of the Anthropocene. And to the sentence, one of the potentials of art is to open up the boundaries of the world. Image 4 refers to the increasing problem of permafrost in mountain landscapes. And again, the statement is, art and culture matter. Even in conflict situations, they are anything but a luxury. Image 5 is an indicator for the increasing land erosions caused by change of permafrost in the Alps. And it's a statement again, art is a genuine cognitive faculty that equal to all other sciences. Art has a lot to offer for peace building. This image again refers to the issues of biodiversity, which is in the Alps under great pressure. Now a selection of my artistic works. Art without an object, but with impact. Example 1 is about my research on water. Water is increasingly becoming a rare good, both in quantity and quality, thus threatening people's livelihoods in many regions of the world. Moreover, common patterns are changing fast. With the disappearance of many glaciers, the notion of water towers is becoming obsolete. The phenomenon of too little or too much water is manifesting through a variety of negative impacts. This calls for new forms of awareness raising, mobilization, and collaborations. Water also has an aesthetic dimension. It is the element that makes our planet the blue planet. Water is beauty, and water shapes the face of our Earth. Many of these processes, however, are invisible. This aspect is attracting for me as an artist. So, what can art contribute to address the issues of water? Switzerland is considered to be the water castle of Europe. Since more than 30 years now, I take a close watch on the potential of 16 highly mineralized water sources in eastern Switzerland, known since centuries for their curing potential. Today, within the globalized water economy, however, they are no longer of commercial significance, but even more so of ecological importance. Every source not only contains different minerals, but also a different color. This phenomenon is of great interest for me as an artist and has inspired me for many works in different scales and techniques. Here's just an impression from my studio, which is more like a laboratory with all these essences collected directly on the source from these mineral water sources in eastern Switzerland. So one of my projects is entitled Art Without an Object, but with Impact. It was created for the new headquarter of the biggest wastewater treatment plant in Switzerland. A building, including offices, laboratories, and facilities for employees, constructed with the highest ecological standards. The concept developed in close cooperation with the renowned Swiss architects Bauart and started in 2008 in the first possible stage of the design process, which is to say, with the first architectural sketches. A procedure which is, in contrast to most public art projects, absolutely exceptional, transcending the pure formal aesthetic foundation of an artwork into a participative process. My project is in 3 parts. Intervention A emerged during the planning and construction phase of the building. Actually, the building you see is the sculpture. My intervention was based on mineral water from the lower Engadin Valley in the Swiss Alps. In other words, during the entire building process, which lasted from January 2010 until December 2011, I added water from 3 curative springs in precise dose into all water-based construction materials such as concrete, paint, facade plaster, or joint cement, both in the interior and in the exterior elements. The final artwork is entirely invisible. It is pure energy. This refers not only to the subtle levels of perception, but also is a reference to the findings of quantum physics, indicating that energy goes beyond matter, much more is, in complex layers, information or potentiality, a distinct transformative power. The new headquarter of the wastewater treatment plant in Berne is art, architecture, and a body of resonance at the same time. Art is in the building. An intervention aiming to be both ethically responsible and valid as a work of sustainable art. To create such an invisible artwork is no longer a self-profiling of an artist in public space, but a participatory dynamic process. This also questions the role of an artist fundamentally. If an artist works with participatory aesthetics, he gives up the image of a solely working creator and strategic priorities on knowledge sharing. Now to intervention B. This part is related to the ground floor design of the new building. It is conceived as a forum for water issues. In a first measure, I implemented a water advisory board. The team included 7 water experts from different professional fields, personalities from science, politics, and philosophy. The team functioned as a focal point and met during the entire construction process for debate on water, focusing on issues such as water hygiene, the aesthetics of water, gender and water, or sustainable use of water. All the issues discussed led finally to the Forum for Water Issues, a place now used for frequently water conferences and lectures for students and visitors in general. As you know, the vision of sustainable development is one of the greatest challenges of our time. But this refers not only to scientific, technical, economic, or sociological challenges. It also includes a cultural, aesthetic dimension. Taking this fact into consideration, an emergent strategy to strengthen the arts and culture within the grand challenges confronting humanity is of great importance. This is especially accurate for the ecosystem water. Without water, there is no sustainable development. Today, however, more than 40% of the world population has no access to clean water and sanitation systems. The UN Millennium Goal for securing ecological sustainability, and especially the SDG goal number 6 on water, therefore aims to reduce these structural problems. The goal, however, can only be reached when all forms of professional knowledge get active and creative. This includes inescapable the knowledge of art. Sustainable development in this particular context is an aesthetic imperative. I'm therefore convinced that time is ready to discuss in a serious way what role art plays in defining our sustainable future. I'm convinced we need a culture policy for the future. Art and culture are expressions that build society. But now back to the project Art Without an Object, but with Impact. The third intervention is a booklet documenting the entire work process. The paper for this publication was produced in a paper mill with the same mineral water as used in the building construction. Communication as a holistic approach. To sum up, the project Art Without an Object, but with Impact, brings attention to aesthetic issues of water, wastewater, and the value of water. It goes beyond the purely rational and formalistic structures, but also engages senses, emotions, empathy, as well as a meditative reflection. The second work example is entitled In the Midst on the Margins, and is about my artistic research in forests and biodiversity since 1988. Forests have always been of major importance in my artistic work. They are complex, multi-layered phenomena, a constantly changing organism with different structural configurations, not to speak of the beauty, the sounds, the sense, the various facets of light. The contemporary forest interests me as a wilderness and as a social mirror, a place where you can see all the fear, the ideals, and conceptual tensions of the unfortunate dualism, nature here and culture there. This is especially relevant for forests in the Northern Hemisphere, which are indicators of climate change. Speaking about biodiversity in alpine landscapes, which is a very sensitive and multi-layered issue, I explore herbs and natural remedies and include, for example, blueberries in my work. This has no purely aesthetic reasons, but surveys the plant in question for its therapeutic significance. The blueberry is a source material. This primarily concerns the essence myrtillene contained in the plant sap, and therein lies its deep symbolism in relation to the Quinchia essentia. For centuries, blueberries have been a popular medicinal plant, among others, an eye therapeutic agent. The wonderful blue-violet colorant myrtillene helps to improve the eyesight. I use this aspect as a metaphor in my artistic practice. For instance, in analog black and white photographs fixed with choice of wild blueberries. Here, 3 different prints from different pristine forests in Switzerland. Blueberries are also used in museum exhibitions by painting the plant sap directly onto the wall, as seen here in my exhibition at Museum Helmhaus in Zurich. Another important process is to use blueberries and other plant saps as dye for my sketches and paintings, by now an oeuvre of several hundred works. Here you see mind maps based on notes made during the climate conference COP21 in Paris. The third chapter of my work is on glaciers and climate change in the Alps. Since the Rio de Janeiro Conference on Sustainable Development in 1992, I'm interested in long-term observations and dynamics of the mountain climate systems with its 3 major components: atmosphere, terrestrial ecosystems, and permafrost, and how they are reacting on our anthropogenic disturbance and exploitation. Climate change is a fact of contemporary society. This is especially relevant for Switzerland and the Alps, with increasing natural hazards. The consequences for the ecosystems are only visible in the vegetation, in the aquatic systems, in geology, hydrology, etc. And we observe a dramatic visual change in the mountain landscape. The Alps become gray again. And this does not fit with the romantic images needed by the tourist industry. Melting glaciers in mountain landscapes, however, are not simply a matter of scientific facts and figures and political debates. Challenges arising from climate change and policy responses to it must be assessed also from an artistic, aesthetical, emotional perspective. And we are asked to recognize that climate change also is a moral and ethical crisis. One of my first works on glaciers and climate change was made for an exhibition in 2003. The sound installation entitled Lofty Dryness is a sound installation based on sounds of glaciers and rivers in the Swiss Alps. Sounds were recorded in and on top of glaciers and then arranged into a 24-channel surrounding composition. This image indicates how much the glacier melted within 14 years only. The white chair shows the glacier tongue where we recorded as seen in the image before. So it's an incredible melting, not only as it comes to the length, but also to the volume of a glacier, very typical for the glaciers in Switzerland in general. Another growing sculpture is the project Symbiosis of Responsibility. Originally initiated in context with my mandate by the Swiss government and the curators of Artport Making Waves in Paris as artistic observer at the UN Climate Change Conference COP21 in Paris in 2015. The work is based, as seen here on the mind map, on interconnectedness of art, science, and indigenous people's knowledge. One part is a music video entitled Blues for the Glaciers, recorded live on a glacier in the Alps before the conference in Paris. There was no overdue, no fake, nothing. I just went on top of the glacier and I played this composition, which was filmed, and not any changes in the post-production. So a real live performance. During the conference, the video was presented in connection with a panel discussion on art and climate change at the Grand Palais in Paris. Artistic research on such complex topics as climate change is for several reasons of importance. The complexity of climate change requires equally complex responses that entail the cooperation of stakeholders across the various levels and sectors of the global community. The International Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, states in his latest synthesis report, many adaptations and mitigation options can help address all present climate crises, but no single option is sufficient by itself. Effective results depend on cooperation and dialogue at all scales. And I repeat this sentence, effective results depend on cooperation and dialogue at all scales. These two images represent the tension between scientific and indigenous people's knowledge, a topic present in many climate conferences, always heavily debated. To mention just one aspect, unbalanced development in environmental sciences has led to asymmetry of disciplines in which the natural sciences are placed at the forefront, while the environmental humanities, holistic knowledge, and especially indigenous people's knowledge are resigned to the margins. An increasingly technocratic ideology is creeping into environmental issues. Promises of quick technical fixes are gaining priority over long-term complexes, processes of knowledge seeking. The image on the right hand is a person from the Amazon, and it's a very, very clear indicator. Indigenous people from NGOs also, they tried to raise their voice, but they had no access to any of these so-called high segment panels with the ministers or wherever really important statements had to be made and to be decided for future generations. So no access for indigenous people. I think because of that, art can play an important role as a bridge builder. With our global, increasingly fragile and vulnerable ecosystems, art has an important role to play, reminding us of our humanity, of emotions, and empathy. Artists at their heart have the task of transformation. My goal is to grasp the connectedness that ties together the symptoms, the basic source, the inner structures, and its potential for the future. Only a truly multi-faced and transdisciplinary mode of producing knowledge can contribute to the wisdom necessary to clear an alternative path with our common Earth. To sum up, climate change is not only an issue of facts and figures, but also of aesthetics and ethics. Debates on the future viability of our society therefore must move beyond the scientific, economic, and political structures. Art and culture plays an essential role within this context. I now come to my final statements. We live in the Anthropocene epoch. Be it climate change, the loss of biodiversity, depletion of resources, economic inequalities, political and social polarization, the risks of transhumanism or pandemics, the global challenges reveal the true extent of the interdependency of economic, social, ecological, and cultural processes. Due to the enormous complexity of these issues, we are confronted with a new picture of the world, not only from a scientific, social, or economic point of view, but also from an aesthetic point of view. All phenomena therein are an expression of one and the same crisis, which is primarily a crisis of perception. Perception is in the broadest sense, is the core competence of artistic creation. In it, the research for transformations manifests itself. The demand for transformative problem-solving approaches, however, means nothing less than the program of a profound revision of our social values. But this in turn requires confidence in the capacity for human development. What does this mean for art? The implementation of the UN Agenda 2030, a blueprint for the future of the world, is in fact a cultural task, a social process that connects our present with the future. Therefore, the integration of the arts, be it visual art, music, literature, film, or theater, into these discussion processes is indispensable. A debate on the relationship between art, science, politics, and economics is long overdue, because an eco-social transformation of our society will not succeed so long as aesthetic strategies are dispensed with. The question is, by which vocabulary can this be achieved? I believe we have to treat our world in a more respectful way. The systematic plundering of our planet, which has been a customary practice so far, must be replaced by an ethos of global protection. And we need urgently creative attention beyond the linear, the reductionist approaches that have proved insufficient and often counterproductive. Our approach should be based on cooperation, linking wisdom from the past with acknowledgement of the present and visions for the future. It is within this perspective that I'm asking myself, what is the role of art in our time? How can geographical, ideological, cultural, and political differences be bridged and concrete solutions be supported through art? What makes the scale of the human and ecological challenges facing the world today, as we have removed ourselves from the essential means to sustain life and destroy ourselves spiritually, emotionally, and economically? I see three essential futures at the center. First, the principle of dialogue. Dialogue is the only appropriate alternative to segregation, fragmentation, and inflexibility. In fact, dialogue is the essence of the 21st century. This principle is more important than ever, not least of all, because social reality has become far too complex for us to indulge in the luxury of reduction to discrete individual disciplines. Sustainable solutions will only emerge through the networking of different competencies. I therefore believe that politics, public authorities, the scientific community, and the private sector should involve us artists in the debate on a sustainable society. As researchers, advisors, ambassadors, board members, or lateral thinkers. And in any case, not too late. Second, the potential of a culture of respect. In times of disorientation, it needs the aesthetics of mindfulness. We live in an increasingly digitized world, are totally linked up, have access to infinite amount of information. But all this will count for nothing unless we establish a culture of mutual respect at the same time. Only an understanding on different views and perspectives will enable us to solve the pending problems. Ethical criteria, especially aspects of environmental ethics, are of particular importance. We have to draw attention to the potential of art and culture in cultivating empathy and trust. In a world in which the public sphere is becoming increasingly fragmented, art and culture can educate, shape, and strengthen communities and the societal structures around us. Third, the power of solidarity. What we need now are symbiotic systems. In nature, symbioses are highly effective systems of interdependence with existential impact. Lichens, for example, as seen here on this image, indicate that the evolution of nature is not only shaped by competition, but also by social behavior. This is highly relevant. Instead of competition, the usual approach, we also have the option of mindfulness. Unrestrained expansion, turf wars, or the usual narcissism is meaningless, because those who constantly think about how to outsmart the other with ingenious strategies lose their ability to empathize. Solidarity means trust in the we. Therefore, I plead for the NETOs that will jointly shape the future. How will this succeed in practice? The following approach, at least, seems plausible to me. There's no time left for pessimism. If we care about our legacy for future generations, now is the time to take decisive global action. For this to succeed, we need a symbiosis of responsibility. Unfortunately, we are still far from living it because our actions are not based on what we know. On the one hand, there is still a lack of personal and political will to make a truly fundamental paradigm change. On the other hand, there is a fundamental misunderstanding of the term sustainability in itself, because sustainable development entails not only fractal knowledge in the fields of economics, social issues, or ecology, but also the dimension of culture. All components are mutually dependent. The existing gaps between the academic discourse, the economic reality, and the creative power of art must be overcome in order to open up new possibilities for imagining, feeling, engaging, and creating. This approach is still largely unknown in the political development strategies. For example, the Millennium Development Goals, which were launched by the UN in the year 2000, did not include culture in their targets and indicators. Also, the most important Paris Agreement 2015, in this paper, culture has no role to play. The word culture appears exactly once. The same is true for the Sustainable Development Goals of the Agenda 2030. The term culture plays a marginal role and is only mentioned in Goal 4, education, under point 4.7. The term culture is missing in all other 16 goals of the Sustainable Development Goals. Still, speaking as an artist, the vision of an environmentally conscious and socially responsible work community involves more than political debates. It is about holistic perception. It sets other priorities and relies on another time culture, alertness, and a deep understanding of ecosystems. These are forms of knowledge that have been applied for centuries, among others by indigenous cultures. Today, in the shadow of the dominant digital culture, they regain relevance again. I'm certain that a lastingly viable society cannot be achieved without the knowledge inherent in and imparted by art in all its aesthetic and cultural dimensions. Art plays a key role in modern society. To say even more, art plays an important part in the story of who we are, respectively discusses who we should be. But first and foremost, a sustainable society can only be realized if the separation between culture and nature is overcome. A cognition that already Alexander von Humboldt was very familiar with. Ultimately, it's about the awareness of protecting our common home. This is a quote from Francis from Assisi, our common home, and opposing the cynical sanity and fake news of our time from a viewpoint of commonality. We are asked to resolve conflicts in a spirit of reconciliation. Doing so involves a sense of compassion, dignity, and caring. We have to reconcile ourselves with our Mother Earth. The answer lies within ourselves. Let's walk the talk across the borderline. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
George, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for that. We've got some fabulous questions. I'm not at all surprised. I think you've inspired a lot of the people who tuned in today for your webinar. It's hard to know exactly where to start, so I'm just going to kind of launch in. One of the things that I know is central to the things that you talk about and what's at the heart of your practice is this idea of dialogue. And there are a couple people who have asked a variation on the question, do you see ways in which the various different professionals who need to be in dialogue with each other, whether they're scientists or artists or architects and building professionals, do you think there's a way that as part of their professional training that they can spend time learning each other's concerns to help foster that kind of collaborative, holistic dialogue that we so desperately need?
Well, from my experience, there are two keynotes to it. Mm-hmm. You need an open mind. You always have to be sort of like in a beginner's mind to be aware of, maybe somebody else could have something very interesting to say as well, so why not be open-minded to this? Mm-hmm. And the other one is respect, because if it's not in a flat hierarchy, a communication is very, very difficult. So you have to respect the other people's viewpoint, mm-hmm. experience, wherever they stay, wherever they come from. But maybe that also includes learn to listen. And then by a respectful way of communication, it can really easily come to unexpected great results. That's actually my experience from all the works. You maybe remember one of these images was with craftsmen standing on the construction site. I mean, without any trust, no way to walk and work together for months and months, you know. So one of the keynotes really is open-mindedness, and the other one is respect. Of course, that refers also to education, and education is, of course, very, very important. If you are educated, and if you know, you are sort of like informed about this possibility of transdisciplinary cooperation and working, that maybe really opens up the perspectives in general.
And that gets me to I think the other thing that I think a lot of people are really intrigued by, which is your contact with representatives of indigenous cultures, how you have ended up developing your understanding and awareness of their concerns and how their knowledge needs to play into this dialogue. And so one of the questions we got was not just how Native people have influenced your work, but what you're inspired by in terms of specific practices or beliefs. Is it research on multiple cultures, or is it driven by the people that you've had a chance to meet?
Well, this is a complex and multi-layered question, indeed. Let's say like this, I was always, since my childhood, interested in indigenous people's knowledge and traditions, mythology and cultures, including shamanistic traditions. It then really got much stronger while I was living in Finland. I lived almost 7 years in Finland. So I got in contact with the Sami people from the northern territories of Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Russia. And they're a nomadic culture. And then after this, while studying in the United States, I went many times to the Western states, the Hopi reservations, Navajos, and so on. And then in Canada to the Assiniboines. And I was always incredibly impressed by their deep respect for nature. And that's something which took me really by my heart. So step by step, and this is a very sensitive process, you get into dialogue. Maybe you get a contact, and then slowly, step by step, you can build up also a trusty situation, which is not very, very easy to do so for understandable reasons. But so I really trust in the culture of time, step by step. A very good example is when I worked almost 10 years in the Northern Urals in Russia, in the Republic of Komi. I worked together with a shamanistic healer. But it took me about 5 years to get her trust before she really got me involved and having an open discussion. She showed me all her herbs and remedies and the procedures she's treating people and so on and so on. But I trust in this. It's a long-term way of understanding, listening. And as I said, conferring or referring to, let's say, like the climate debates. It's really my absolutely strong belief that the knowledge of indigenous people, which are having this more holistic understanding of ecosystems, we should really include their knowledge. We should really listen to them because, first of all, indigenous people are not the cause of the climate change, yet they are not really taken serious as they are making protests, they are manifesting, whatever in wherever country, whatever it is. For me, a shocking experience, especially in Paris and in Bonn, when I had this UNO mandate and I got into all this so-called Heiswagen panels, there was no representatives from indigenous people. They were only in this public spheres having own pavilions for representative like say NGO presentations or something like that. And I thought they really need to be heard what they have to say. So this is an interesting point, and I keep on all these discussions and talks. And meanwhile, I have several friendships and very inspiring every time and almost in every of my works.
One of the things that someone asked that actually was something I wanted to ask as well, which is when you were presenting in a transnational and transdisciplinary setting, particularly where it's being driven by policymakers or scientists, do you feel that they treat you as an equal? Are you part of the inside of that collaborative thing, or do you find yourself almost like the indigenous people working from the outside, looking to be taken seriously?
This is a very interesting question. Yes, indeed, having a mandate and then being part of a delegation, talking about sustainable forestry or, whatever. The first experience has always been, no, I'm not taken serious at all. It's confusing these people because they think, what is this guy doing in this delegation? I mean, how come he has access to this kind of debates? But that's exactly the point. But then step by step, you can give respect. And that includes, you have to know the issues, what they're talking about. So that's one of the reasons why I studied all these hundreds and hundreds of pages from the IPCC reports as it comes to climate issues. I know the vocabulary, I know the problems, and also see how difficult it is to communicate. So I always insist in that and say, listen, look, an artist has a different approach. It's not my ambition to be a climate expert or a biodiversity expert. No, I'm an artist. But maybe we, the artists, have a different point of view. So why not listen to the views of the artists? Our vocabulary is different, but it's equal. And step by step now, in many of these conferences I attend, step by step, they know, okay, there is this artist and he is taking these issues very serious. Maybe we should listen to him, but with policymakers and diplomats, it's sometimes quite difficult.
Do the scientists ever seek you out for collaborations, or are you the one who's looking to collaborate with them?
No, more and more scientists get in contact with me, especially as it comes to water and biodiversity. Yeah, and that's fantastic because I really think, yes, always talking together brings us a step forward. Yeah, no, more and more I get contacted by scientists.
That's awesome, because I think one of the things that the concerns we all have is how, on the artistic and cultural side, do we position ourselves to have our voices heard, to become part of that? You pointed out how much of the UN agenda does not directly address the influence of culture in terms of changing people's hearts and minds and really pushing for long-term strategies rather than short-term policy fixes. And so really, I think the issue of how do we find our voices? How do we find ways to make those voices heard in a meaningful way?
That's a big task. Yeah. It's daily business for me, because the experience, of course, and it's almost every week the same, It is very difficult to make this bridge building. And yet you have to insist and you keep up to look at these contacts and tell them, hey, I've been writing you now 10 letters in order of the problems we have with climate change in Switzerland related to glaciers. Why wouldn't we make a meeting? I just initiated by the Swiss government a task force about climate change and insisting to have artists from all fields of the arts to be included in this task force to discuss. And it took months before they really understood what was the message. But now last week, I just got an answer. Yes, they're taking this into consideration. They really think, why wouldn't we once include an artist or artist in general to listen what they are seeing in these issues and in these tasks and so on. But it's tricky, it's very tricky. And then you have to insist, you are telling very clearly, your position is being an artist, not trying to be a biologist or a geologist or whatever. So insist on the things you know, but then again, tell about the cross building, about the transdisciplinary approach and the power which comes out of culture.
Yeah. One of the questions that someone else asked goes back to the first project that you showed us about the water treatment facility, wanting to know, how do you as an artist, but also as a member of literally the conceptual and building team, how do you evaluate the effects of your interventions? Do you have a sense of how the workers approach either their task or their workplace as a result of your participation in how that whole thing came off?
Well, this really refers to the subtle layers of the work. You know, funny enough, I was just working with students from the University of Berne last week in this building, and the question exactly came up like that. And then I said, okay, why don't we just ask the employees?
Okay.
So we went to the employees and said, well, how do you feel working in your office, in your laboratory, you know, by knowing that there was this curing and mineral water used in the entire building? And they were all totally enthusiastic and said, we are so pleased to work in these rules and there's such a good atmosphere, you know, and yes, we love to work in this site and in this place. So the answer was very positive, but of course, well, it's not visible. You cannot really say, but our argument always, this is not only an argument about homeopathic medicine or subtle non-visible layers. It mostly also refers to quantum physics, as I mentioned also before. Quantum physics is more and more talking about resonance and potentiality. So it's not anymore about matter. It's really about pure energy, about resonance. And that's something is fascinating very much so. So finally, yes, I believe I succeeded, but maybe some people also think, well, I don't feel anything at all. And funny enough, you know, right at the moment, there's a film produced about my artistic work, and the camera team and the producers, they're taking this example work. So they went there with a homeopathic doctor to check out what he feels about this building when he is in there. I don't know the result yet, but
that's
anyways.
Fantastic. That's a little scary, but that's fantastic.
Well, maybe they take me apart, you know, whatever.
You know, well, critics. George, thank you so much. We could go on for an awfully long time, and needless to say, I will welcome the opportunity we can next do a conversation like this in person. But I just wanted to thank you so much for being a part of this. I thought it would be inspirational for our audience who's kept with us the whole time to hear your words as we begin to think about how we can have a Humboldtian impact on our own environment by taking seriously your call for dialogue, for solidarity, for a transcultural approach. The idea of listening, of being respectful, all of those things really matter. For the audience, what you need to do is go to George's website and you need to watch and listen to his 5-minute piece called Lofty Dryness. The link for it is going to be in the chat. It's such a profoundly moving piece, listening as George is capturing the sound of glaciers literally as they are melting sort of underfoot. But you know, this has been such an extraordinary experience, and I think that I always learn a lot from listening to you, and now I'm inspired to go try to find ways to make my voice heard. For all of you out there, you've heard me say this before, I'll say it again. We're so appreciative for the support you show for the Smithsonian American Art Museum, tuning in for programs like this. As a nonprofit organization, we're able to share this free digital content thanks to funding from generous supporters like many of you. We'd like you to please consider showing your support with a donation, and a link to donate on our website has just been dropped in the chat feature so that you have the chance to do that. I want to thank everyone who asked wonderful questions today, and just to encourage you to tell everyone you know that give us a couple of days to a week and George's presentation will join the others up on the museum's website and our YouTube channel, so that we can all benefit from a listen when we need a little extra inspiration. So George, thank you. Can't wait to see what the future brings.
Okay, thank you so much. It's a very big honor for me to be part of this, and thanks for everybody who was listening and looking at it. Let's keep up the dialogue, and we really have to work further on. Okay, It was my very big pleasure. Thanks a lot.
And to you. Thank you so much.
All right.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.